Welcome into this episode of This Week in Hockey East. I'm Bridget Prue here with Eric Galanti. We're going to go around the men's and women's games in Hockey East this week, as well as talk a little bit about the women's Beanpot that's coming up on Tuesday. But first, we want to get into some World Junior talk. We've been doing this the last few weeks, and we finally know the winner. It is Team USA winning gold for the second straight year. And Eric, there were so many Hockey East players involved in this win for USA. We're going to go through both what they did, as well as some of the Hockey East players for the other national teams.
Yeah, it's really amazing. This didn't need to be one of those things we needed to like will a storyline into existence of hockey's participation in this tournament. They were all over it. And most notably, they were all over it in massive moments in this tournament. And I think that's the thing that stands out more than anything else is this connection between the college game and specifically Hockey East and everything we're talking about in terms of, what path are these athletes going to choose now that there's more and more options available to them. And you look at the number of college players, the number of Hockey East players that were involved in crucial spots in this tournament. It really stands out as, everyone was making the joke on Twitter, hey, this coach or that coach can just show this picture to any recruit coming in, right? But it's really true. I mean, number one, Teddy Stiga scores the overtime winner. Talk about the moment that he's had the last month. Remember, Bridget, we were talking about him having to play as the fifth or sixth defenseman for Boston College in that last series against UMass Lowell because BC was down so many Ds. And now he's scoring the game-winning goal, his first goal of the tournament. By the way, 3-on-3 overtime for 20 minutes is completely insane, but I kind of
It's
love it.
crazy.
But it's completely insane.
It was simultaneously like incredible to watch and hard to watch as somebody that's used to the NHL format where it's like 5 minutes at most for 3-on-3 seems like a lot. But I actually was surprised how long the overtime went,
Yeah,
considering
that's right.
how many good chances happened before they got that final game-winning goal from Stiga.
Yeah, it was pretty wild and fun to watch in a totally crazy way. I think the thing you have to start with though is some of these veteran guys coming back, right? So Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault are the two that stands out who played on last year's team in major roles, play on this year's team in major roles. And we've heard a lot of it from Leonard. It's true of Perreault too. Part of the reason these guys decided to come back was not just their unfinished business at Boston College, but wanting to be the first group of Americans to win this tournament back-to-back years. And now they've accomplished that in a major way, right? Leonard won the tournament MVP. There probably were a lot of guys on the American team that could have won, but he led the U.S. in goals. He was tied for second with the U.S. in points with 10. He was such a sometimes we talk about who's that guy on top of the scout that everyone's trying to gear their defense to. That guy was Ryan Leonard, right? It felt like every team was trying to get under Leonard's skin and do whatever they could do to try to take him out of the game. He almost had the overtime winner in that 3-on-3 on that little couple of deep breakaway right to the net. So I think it kind of just shows, his decision to come back and to do this again and to be able to accomplish it and win this tournament again. It's really an amazing thing. And I kind of think it speaks to that decision to come back.
Yeah, and that Leonard Pro Hagen's line was definitely high on everyone's scout. I heard the Canadian crowd booing that line at
Yes.
times every time Leonard would touch the puck, including in 3-on-3 overtime. And that just shows you how these guys have just broken onto the scene and become such real assets. And obviously, Leonard, a Capitals prospect, he'll head on to a great career after Hockey East, I'm sure. Stuck around for a sophomore season, and now here he is, the captain of Team USA. But I wanted to go through some of the other numbers because you mentioned he's the MVP. Well, Cole Hudson was the first defender to ever lead the tournament in points. He had 11 points, and he was right there in the talk as well for a guy on Team USA that could have been MVP of the tournament. And then, of course, Leonard's line mate, Gabe Perreault, had 10 points. They both were plus 10, and Hagen's as well, plus 9, 5 goals, 4 assists. But I also want to get into some of the BU guys, and we have other different Hockey East teams that were involved in this. But you look at Cole Iserman, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in his 7 games, and that was despite him averaging less than 12 minutes of time on ice. And then you look a little bit beyond USA, which won gold for the second straight year, and you look to what the Czech Republic was able to do, and Michael Robel out of UMass, and how he was able to knock Canada out of the tournament 2 years in a row, win bronze 2 years in a row, in net for them, and as part of another crazy, like, heart-stopping situation in international hockey that was a 14-round shootout.
Yeah.
That was insane. So both the bronze medal and the gold medal game were so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I thought Hrabal really had an excellent tournament for the second year in a row, and it's a chance for him to try to build some confidence off of this into the UMass season. We know how big he is, physically big in goal, and the way he plays and that style. And it's just sometimes about finding that consistency with him, and it felt like he had it in some big spots in that tournament. Jenko was a key contributor for Slovakia. He had a couple of goals. I thought Tom Willander really stood out for Sweden. You know, Sweden makes it to the medal round games, ends up losing that game to Czechia. But he was really good. So I think that's the big takeaway from this. It's not just the fact that, you know, you and I can sit here and read you a list of guys from Hockey East who played in this tournament. It was the fact that we could read that list and they were all so impactful over the course of the tournament. The fact that 24 of the Americans' 37 goals were scored by Hockey East guys, right? 24 of 37. 28 goals total in this tournament were scored by Hockey East guys, if you include Willander and Janko. The craziest stat of all was that there was one American goal the entire tournament that did not have someone from BC or BU getting a point on it. I mean, it's completely insane that that happened, but it's true. And, you know, most notably, we could give you those goal numbers, but in the semis and the finals, 7 of the 8 goals scored by the Americans were scored by Hockey East guys. So in the biggest moment, it was the Hockey East guys stepping up. And, you know, for us covering it, that made it really special, but it'll be really interesting to see how those guys come back and now channel that into what we've sort of dubbed this long extended trophy season, starting now running into, you know, Beanpot and going forward. So it was a really special tournament to watch. It was fun to get to cover it a little bit. And I think it's one that we're certainly going to remember. When we come back, we will dive into around Hockey East a little bit, talk about some of the Nesson games we have this week. There's a lot to talk about on our show today. Come back with us.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. It's time to go around Hockey East, presented by the Boston Harbor Hotel. Visit hockeyeastonline.com for your chance to win championship tickets and a 2-night stay at the Boston Harbor Hotel. And we're going to start out by looking at the 2 Nesson games we have this weekend. First of all, we have some Friday night Hockey East on Nesson, UMass at Northeastern. I will be part of that call. I'm excited for that. Eric, take us through the Northeastern side of things first.
Yeah, did they finally get that win, right? We've been talking about it, it feels like, for so long. Could Northeastern get that win in statement fashion? You know, it felt like they had the pieces to do it. We've thought it's been in there the whole time, and they finally get it with a big win on the road at Quinnipiac, 5-1 final result that stood out in a big way. And it starts to lead to this question: are we in for one of those Northeastern January runs that we've seen the last couple of years, right? Last year, starting January 26th, a little bit later than now, they finished 10-4-2 and won a Beanpot. The year before that, starting right around now, January 7th, they won that game at Frozen Fenway. They went 9-3-3 down the stretch, won a Beanpot. So are we in store for that today? And it's always felt like there's that big win that starts the stretch. And we'll see if that's it for Northeastern. And to do it on the road against a Quinnipiac team that had been red hot, by the way, that had lost just one game going back to Thanksgiving. So that was impressive. Jack Williams, once again, right? I mean, he's the guy that, you know, last year we talked about as maybe the most underrated player in the league. He's our night shift all academic standout this week. 3 primary assists plus a shorty in that game. And the most amazing thing is he's been kind of doing it banged up. Jerry Keefe told us post game that, you know, he hasn't really been taking faceoffs because he's kind of banged up right now. So that makes it even more amazing what Northeastern's accomplished. Can they take care of home ice on Friday against a UMass team that's, you know, in a similar situation, Bridget? Because we're looking to see, can UMass gain some momentum after scoring 8 goals in their final game out in Arizona?
Yeah, they're coming in off that. They lost the first game of that tournament to number 18 Cornell, and then they came back and really just put up numbers against Robert Morris. And so they're coming off of that big win, and they're also getting Michael Robel back. So that'll be a big addition for him, and him coming back with the confidence and the bronze medal, like we mentioned earlier, could help them as well. And there's a few things I want to focus on for the UMass side. Their power play has been outstanding recently in particular. The last 5 games, they have 7 power play goals, and there's been 6 games this season that they've had multiple power play goals. And this is a power play unit that, the top unit at least, that Greg Carvel isn't afraid to roll out 5 forwards on, which you don't see necessarily all the time, but the offensive firepower that he rolls out there on that top unit is one of the main reasons why their power play numbers are so good this year. And their penalty kill, 82.5%. So that's pretty good as well. And then you talk about just trying to find some consistency for UMass. And Greg Carvel thinks that it's there. He has the team to do it, but you've seen some ups and downs. And when you look at their upcoming schedule, the next 7 games could be a stretch where they could get back on track. They have a winnable schedule coming up, but then they have a really tough schedule to end the year. They're playing Boston College and Maine again, UMass Lowell. So these are some high-ranked teams that they're going to have to play as the season comes to a close.
You mentioned the power play. It's worth noting the thing that made UMass's power play so good when they were getting into the national championship game and even the years past that, right, Bridget, was it was defender led, right? It was McCarr, it was Scott Morrow, it was Ryan Ufko, which is what's so amazing about the fact that they're where they are at over 30% now, and it's forward led. And sometimes, as you said, he's throwing 5 forwards on the ice. So that's a really interesting distinction, but they found ways to make the power play work. Maybe the biggest game of the weekend, we got to talk about Maine and Lowell. That'll be a Saturday night game on Nesson. Really impressive bounce back for Maine after losing 2 games in a row to Bentley in the first game against Denver. They come back for a 2-1 win. It hasn't been lack of chances for Maine here the last few games, right there. Expected goals have been nearly 5 in 2 of the last 3 games. Now, so if they can find a way to keep posting those numbers, the goals are going to come back. But when you have guys like Harrison Scott, who's now up to second nationally, by the way, as of this recording in 13 goals, you're going to find some ways to win. So they dive back into Hockey East play. It's worth noting here that as Maine takes on this UMass Lowell team, sometimes that Lowell style can be a little bit tricky to play against, as we know. This could go either way, but remember who also plays that Lowell style? Well, Norm Bazen's former assistant coach, Andy Jones, who's done such a good job as the head coach of Bentley, who Maine just struggled with a couple of games ago. So does that allow Maine to have seen the style a little bit, or is it the opposite? We'll see, but that's something certainly worth noting as they take on this Lowell team, which continues to produce really impressive victories.
Yeah, they've won their most recent holiday tournaments. And we talked about it. Norm Bazin likes to go to do those tournaments. He thinks it's a good prep for trophy season as we approach the end of the season. And other teams have, the Beanpot, but they make sure they pick the right tournaments. They won in Lake Placid at the Adirondack Invitational, finished first in that tournament. Then they went out to Palm Springs and won the Coachella Valley Cactus Cup this past weekend. And so they're rolling in with some momentum. They like how they've played in these tournament style situations, and they're going to take on a really good team in Maine this weekend.
And I just love the fact, you look at their last 3 games, their last 8 goals have been scored by 7 different guys. There's so much depth on this Lowell offense. So that should be a really fun and important series in terms of hockey's standings. How about winning tournaments in Lake Placid and Palm Springs? That's the range of where you could win tournaments in the holiday season. We have plenty more to talk about on our show, including a little look at the women's Beanpot, which is coming up on Tuesday. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East, and the Women's Beanpot is already upon us. It's coming up on Tuesday. Should be really, really exciting. First round games being played at Matthews Arena before the final next week at TD Garden. Let's just kind of, we've talked a lot about these teams through the course of this season so far, Bridget. So what are a couple of things that stand out to you? You'll be there on the call that we should be watching for as we get set for another Beanpot.
Yeah, and just to specifically hone in on some Beanpot key points about Hockey East teams, I think it's important to note that this is the second year it's happening at TD Garden. When we talked to some of the coaches and players, they said it was kind of the most nervous they've been pregame for any event, because obviously it's such a big venue and you're playing where the Bruins play. And so keeping those emotions in check is important. And so that means some of those veteran players just need to pass along the message to some of the freshmen that haven't done it before. And some of those freshmen to keep an eye on: Lola Reed out of BU, Eloise Caron from Northeastern, Lauren Glazer. These are all really good freshman forwards that have come in and started to take over key production roles on their teams. And they're players that maybe will deal with a little bit of those nerves when they come into TD Garden for the first time. Goaltending, once again, strong in all 3 of these teams from Hockey East that are going to the Beanpot. Northeastern has 2 great goalies, Lisa Janssen and Paige Taborski, both top 4 in goals against average in Hockey East, and Janssen leads Hockey East in save percentage and goals against average. Northeastern looking to repeat. They are looking for their 20th Beanpot title. They won it in overtime last year, and they do have Skylar Irving coming back. She scored the overtime game winner to take that first title at TD Garden. So keep an eye out for her, as well as the goalies at Boston College has Grace Campbell. She's been outstanding recently, just put up a shutout against Maine, and Callie Shanahan for BU finally healthy. Last year, she was heading into the Beanpot after coming back from injury. She didn't have a lot of time to ramp up for it this year. She's top 3 in Hockey East in save percentage. She's looking healthy. She's looking confident. So goaltending could be a big factor in this one as well. And then to just hit on Harvard, they're coming in with a 2-11-2 record into tonight's game where they'll play against Maine to ramp up towards the Beanpot on Tuesday.
Remember, Harvard does have a win over UConn, so it's not as if they can't throw a really great goaltending performance in and kind of throw a little curveball into this bean pot. I think, a couple of things on top of that. The one thing that I think we saw last weekend that really is intriguing me, Bridget, is I felt like that main game that you and Bob called was Boston College breaking out offensively and finally putting the puck in and matching the number of chances they have. Can they do that consistently? Someone like Julia Pellerin, who's first in Hockey East in shots, she's our sub-above player of the week after a hat trick against Maine. Can they find that offensive firepower? Because we know how good the goaltending is across the board. That could be the one X factor. I'm curious to see if it plays out that way. It'll be BU and Harvard first. BC and Northeastern will be the second game at 7:30 on Nesson before they get to TD Garden for the consolation and the finals. We cannot wait. We do have a lot of other still major games coming up this week on the men's side. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. I'm Bridget Prue with Eric Galanti. It's time to look around the men's side. This segment presented by Boston Children's Hospital, the official children's hospital of Hockey East. Eric, I want to talk about just the way that the non-conference schedule over this holiday stretch has worked out for Hockey East teams. And you look at recently this past Saturday and Sunday, 8-0-0 Hockey East teams went against non-conference. The weekend as a whole, they went 11-2-0 against non-conference opponents. That's just about a 71% win percentage for Hockey East teams.
Yeah, that's where they are in their non-conference overall. It's the best position that Hockey East has maybe ever been in. Remember, we've talked about the non-conference record is what sort of is the differentiator in the pairwise. And last year we were going into the holiday break saying maybe 5, maybe 6 teams, it's possible. But then some losses around the holidays, it really brought the league's overall strength of schedule down. It's the opposite right now, and they are in prime position to have kind of a historic year in terms of number of teams in. Some of these numbers, there's 5 teams inside the top 12. There's 6 inside the cut line right now. And, you could even add UConn at 7, who's been between 15 and 16. And you have 10 teams in this league inside the top 26. Now, not all of them are going to make it, obviously, but what it means is no one's schedule playing league games is going to drop their strength of schedule. So that's what's most important. There is room to gain ground in the strength of schedule, even in conference play. So that's the thing that's really amazing. And you look at the chance. Again, you got to take care of business, but playoffstatus.com, which is a great resource that gives you some percentages here, they have 5 Hockey East teams with a 69% chance or better to get into the tournament. BC, Providence, Maine, Lowell, and UNH. So that's the position that Hockey East is in right now. BU's got a chance, and UConn's got a chance. Let's quickly talk about UConn UNH, because this is a huge weekend for UConn. The next 3 weekends, really. If UConn can find a way to take care of business against New Hampshire, 2 next week at Maine, and then the CT Ice tournament, if they can do that, we have the potential to be talking about 7 teams in the Hockey East tournament, which is crazy to think, but it's that important, these couple of series for UConn. Can they make up that momentum a little bit? They've maybe found their goalie here, Callum Tongue. Ever since he started playing in the games he's played, he has a .960 save percentage. The only games they've lost were to at Lowell 1-0 and at BC in overtime. So UConn may have found something here. UNH is 6-0-1 in their last 7 games. They're 8-1-2 since November 9th. They took care of business in their non-conference in a way they did not last year. So they are both in really great position, but it is UConn who's the team that could take this from 5 or 6 to maybe even a really historic 7. And that's something that we're going to watch with their series this week against UNH.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. It's time for our final segment. We're going to take some short shifts presented by the Shift Group, helping former athletes and veterans become elite business professionals. Eric, start with your short shift.
Yeah, you mentioned how good Hockey East was last weekend on the men's side, that 7-0 record on Saturday. Four of those seven teams set season highs in goals on the same day. Vermont scored eight, UMass scored eight, UConn scored seven, and Northeastern tied their season high with five. So that stood out. But I want to talk about Vermont specifically because they had wins 6-0 and then 8 against Army and 8-1 against St. Lawrence. They have five straight wins. They've scored 30 goals over their last five games, 6+ goals in four of those five. So they are really clicking offensively here.
Yeah, and my short shift has to do with the series on the women's side. That's Providence against Holy Cross. And I think this is important because we talked about a lot about this over the course of this show this year, just the compact nature of the top four teams in Hockey East. Well, these teams are both outside of that, but they're looking to gain ground, get closer to those top four teams of BC, BU, UConn, and Northeastern. So these are points on the line. It's a two-game series, a home and home for Providence and Holy Cross. And I think they both have good goaltenders. Hope Walensky is doing a good job for Providence once again this year. Abby Hornung now up in top three in Hockey East in goals against average. So, I mean, she's been making strides. She's doing well. And like I mentioned, this is just one that feels important to both of these teams in terms of the second half making ground on that top pack.
Yeah, who's going to get a home game in that, quarterfinal and that opening round weekend? Where is this going to fall in terms of the standings? It's all packed together. So there's a lot to, I think, still figure out there, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. It's a jam-packed weekend. We're rolling right into Beanpot. There is so much exciting college hockey coming up, and we appreciate you joining us each and every week, and we'll talk next week with plenty more on This Week in Hockey East.